Good morning. I'm David Hovel, and I work with TLC. I'm kind of the technical coordinator for all things TLC. And this is the first of a two-part presentation that covers the basics of Windows and the basics of the internet. And today it's going to be Windows, Windows, Windows. Now, a lot of the material could work for the Mac OS, but it won't work for phones and most tablets because they don't have the same model. Some of the ideas are the same, but most of them are not. So this is primarily intended for people with Windows systems. In my experience, what most people call problems are really derived from a lack of understanding about what's happening. There just really needs to be some groundwork, some basic knowledge that people have about what's being meant by Windows, by an application, by a platform, by a file, by a folder. And without those fundamental terms well ensconced in the head, little issues seem like big issues. And I'm here to give you some orientation on the 30,000-foot big meaning of a lot of the things that happen on computers of various kinds and on interacting with the data that is so essential to our daily lives. One of my big models is when I watch older people work with computers, I compare that when I see children working with computers. And the biggest difference I see is kids approach it as play. Adults approach it as a task, as an onerous obligation to find their way through something to be able to make it usable for the task at hand. They're goal-oriented. And underneath that goal is always the hidden fear monger that says, I'm not going to get this done in time. I'm going to be late. Oh, I don't know what to do. I don't know how to do an attachment. And what I'm going to recommend and what I'm going to tell you is that all modern software is designed around a model of play and learn, explore, be curious, spread out, click on things, move the mouse around, look to see what happens, be a child, approach it as a child. And generally, one of the implications of this is you must do non-goal oriented time at the computer. Sit down and just say, I'm going to play around with my Gmail and see what I can do. I'm going to readjust my windows and sizes to see how I like setting up windows. You're going to play around the same way you would do if you were a cook organizing a kitchen. You might go in and say, well, my knives are really not that convenient, and my pots and pans, I don't use this pan. I'm going to put it in the garage. I'm going to bring this other pan over here and set it up. When people are organizing their rooms and their lives, they often have pretty non-goal oriented things of figuring out what's the right thing to do. And they don't do that with computers. Why? Because they're old and because they're afraid. You can't help being old, but you can deal with being afraid. Now, I'm going to use the word platform. And what is a platform? A platform is usually a piece of hardware with some software on it. Now, phones typically have only one piece of software you can run. Like if it's an Apple iPhone, you run iOS. If it's an Android tablet, you're running Android. But a platform is really just a word meaning a way to do computing and a way to look at the world that's governed by the software running on whatever piece of hardware is in your hands or in front of your face. It's just a generic word, and that's all. In the second half of this talk, we're going to talk about the internet. And the internet is much, much more than just the World Wide Web. There's a lot of pieces to it. Most of us deal with it through the web, and we're going to talk about that. But that's the next time. I don't want to waste a lot of time talking about what comes next. This is part one, and it's an introduction to Windows, and it's mostly about how to use Windows and files and folders. This introductory section is just a quick tour of some of the most basic fundamental things about what do you encounter when you first sit down at a Windows 10 machine. I'm going to move a window over here so I can see what I'm doing. Now, every computer system has hardware and software, and hardware simply means the physical thing, the physical device. Software is the programs that run on them. And there's many, many layers of programs. Just like in a car, you know, there's an engine and a drivetrain and battery and a starter motor. And you don't deal with all that. You deal with the inside cockpit of your car. You deal with the actual detail of your car through the interface, through the nice, cozy little air-conditioned environment that you are sitting in. And that's what software does, is it presents what the hardware can do and adds value on top of that. Now, I want to point out something that I meant to mention earlier, which is if you look at the way my presentation is oriented, on the left there's a black rectangle. And on the top of that is the name of the section. We're now in the introduction section. Each of the parts of the introduction section have a line in boldface, like what is Windows, the desktop, the taskbar. But the one I'm currently in is yellow. And when you're fast forwarding through the video, you can always tell where you are vis-a-vis the slides, vis-a-vis the presentation as a whole, just by looking at what's over on the left. You'll know what section you're in, and you'll know what the part of that section I'm talking about. Now, the operating system is the core software. It is the basis of everything. It's the thing that's actually talking to the hardware, what we call bare metal. And what I tell people is think of the CEO of the computer. The CEO doesn't do all the work, but the CEO assigns the work and sets up the divisions and gives people offices and gives people power and connects them to the internet. That's what a CEO does, and that's what the operating system does. Why did Bill Gates and the others decide to call Windows Windows? The reason is pretty simple, and that's because in the world of Windows, everything is a window. There's many, many windows, and there's windows inside of windows inside of windows, but your view of the world is a window. The desktop is a window. The applications running on the desktops are windows. And we'll talk about this more, but everything you see is basically a two-dimensional window. Sometimes you don't see that it's two-dimensional, but we'll talk about that later. Also, I'm going to mention this, Windows and the Mac OS and modern systems in general are designed to allow each user to have his or her own logon. Now, what that does is that creates a private environment that's tailored to that user, where their internet bookmarks, their email connections, their applications, their files, everything is just theirs. I know some people do sharing where husbands and wives share a computer as though it were a kitchen cabinet or a sink. That's not a good thing to do. It's not the end of the world, but Windows is designed to run best when you're doing separation of that stuff. And Bonnie and I use separate computers, but I have an account on Bonnie's computer. She has an account on mine. We don't typically use them unless there's an emergency, but it's there. Now, this is the desktop of my main computer. It's got a lot of stuff on it. We're not here to talk about all the stuff on my computer. And what I'm trying to tell you is everything on Windows is some kind of program, including Windows itself. And Windows is a program that can run programs. One of the programs it's running is called the Explorer. And you'll hear that word from me several times. And what does the Explorer do? Well, guess what? It creates the desktop. It's another program. It's a special program. It has special capabilities, but it is just a program, and it creates a window, which is the desktop. This window doesn't have a border. That is to say, it doesn't have a defined edge because it occupies the entire display that you're using. It occupies your entire monitor. And everything on it, all the icons in the background and all the little stuff at the bottom of the screen, these are all run by the desktop. And the desktop is one of the major functions of a program called the Explorer. And you'll amaze your friends if you know what the word Windows Explorer means. We'll talk about it again later. On the desktop, you have icons. And these icons are simply references to either programs or files that let you open up files and let you run applications. You all know this. So pardon me if I go over things that are really obvious. At the bottom of the screen is a thing called the taskbar. We'll talk about that in some detail in a second. And here I'm going to introduce another word to you, and that's the word pane. You know how windows have panes? You know, you have little dividers in a window. Well, a lot of times windows have sub-windows, and the most common word for a sub-window is a pane. The taskbar is a pane. It's a weird pane because it's a stripe across the bottom of your monitor. Now, it might be on the top or on one of the sides. Usually it's at the bottom. That's its default position. And it's very, very handy. It gives you access to all the things your system can do. It lets you search. It lets you switch between programs. It lets you start new programs. It lets you check your internet connection. It lets you check your audio. I mean, the list goes on and on. I'm going to introduce you to the most basic features of what the taskbar does. Again, the taskbar is the gutter. It's the bottom of the desktop. It's a sub-window or pane at the bottom of the screen. Now, if you look at this image that I've got here, I hope you can see it. On the left is the famous start button. And I'm going to demonstrate what the start button does during the demonstration. But it's how you shut down your computer, restart your computer, or find other programs you can run. There's lots of things you can do in the modern start button. Next to that, where it says type here to search, is what's called the Cortana search bar. Now, you may not see a search bar, but it's easy to bring one up. I'll show you how to do that in the demonstration. Again, as we move along to the right, skip over to the Edge icon. You see the swirly wave? That's the icon for the Edge browser that is built into Windows. If you look at it, you'll notice that it doesn't have it's not highlighted, and it doesn't have a line under it like the next one does. That means it isn't running. If you want to make it run, you simply do one click and it fires it up and it goes back into the same window position that you previously had. Most applications remember the size of the window that you previously had and where that window was positioned. Not always, but generally. If we move on next, there's a file folder icon, and it's got a blue line under it. Now, some people will have a blue line, some will have an orange line, sometimes a yellow line. That line means that that program is running. That program is currently active. It's not on the disk somewhere. It's been loaded into memory, and it's actively running. And if you want to switch to it, you just click on it. And as we move along, you see the Chrome icon, the disk, the red, green, and yellow disk. That's Chrome. It's not running. The next one is Firefox. It is running, and so on. And there are many, many settings that we can get to. The easiest way for most people to switch between programs is to go down to the taskbar and click on the icon of the program you want to be on top. The reason the Windows desktop is called the desktop is because there's a model. And the model is kind of like this. Imagine that I'm a desktop and I've got pieces of paper. And I want to see this piece of paper back here. So I want to bring it to the front. The way you do that in Windows is you just click on any part of that window and it will become the active window. It'll move into the front. And that's the most common way to bring something to the top. The other way is to click on the program's icon on the taskbar. And I'll show you another method called Alt-Tab. Now, this little window pops up. If you look on the right-hand end of your taskbar, you'll see there's a bunch of little icons. And on the far right is the notification icon. Don't worry about that. Next to that is the date and time. Next to that is the language you're using. I use several on my computer, don't worry about that. Then if you move over, you'll notice there's one that looks like a computer monitor and a little plug. What I did for this image was I clicked on it, and what I see is that I'm connected to the network called Network 2, and my Wi-Fi is turned off. And the reason for that is because I use hardwired. I use Ethernet wiring in my house. But if you do this on your computer, you'll see what Wi-Fi network you're connected to. The one next to that little icon looks like a little speaker, just to the right there, before it says in US. If you click on that, it'll tell you what you're using as speakers, and it'll let you adjust the volume. But there's all kinds of stuff down here, and the key is to look at it and click around and see what's down there and know what these things are. Okay, it's time for my demonstrations of this first part. I got my pages out of order. Okay, what I'm going to do now is I'm going to stop sharing, and then I'm going to rearrange my desk, and I'm going to share my entire screen with you. Okay. Again, I'm going to move this window around to make it convenient for what I'm looking at. Now, this is a standard desktop. It's a different computer. I won't go into the reasons why. But if you notice, there's a bunch of icons here. Now, I want you to notice something else. Everything in Windows has a notion of focus. In other words, there may be 20 things going on the computer. And when you type, how does Windows know where those keystrokes are supposed to go? Well, that's the idea of focus. Focus means this is the application that's going to hear your keystrokes or hear your microphone or recognize your mouse. And underlying the notion of focus is the idea of selection. So notice as I click on this icon, a little window shows up around it. And as I move around, that window moves. And that's because that's the thing that's selected, which says if I double click right now, I'm going to start Microsoft Word. Now, talking about vision, one of the most common things is there's a wheel on your mouse. And on your keyboard, on the lower right-hand corner is a thing called the control button. And again, don't do this now. But when you watch this video again, I want you to try these things. I'm going to hold down the control key and rotate my mouse wheel. Notice my icons are getting bigger. If I rotate the other way, they get smaller. The most common way to increase the size of your font on Windows and on the Mac as well is hold down the control key and rotate the wheel. Pushing it away from you, you zoom out. Pulling it towards you, you zoom in. Okay, I have already loaded up Microsoft Word, and I have Chrome running. Okay, so there's Chrome and there's Microsoft Word. Now, if I'm typing here, notice that the cursor is flashing. That tells me I'm working in there. If I come over here, the cursor stops flashing in Chrome and starts flashing in Windows. Now I'm going to make these windows overlap. And watch what happens. When I click on some part of the Chrome window, it gets moved to the top. And that's called Z order. And I won't go into the details, but think of it as the window pile. If I just click on this other window, that becomes the top of the window pile. Now I'm going to confuse the issue. I'm going to go to my taskbar and I'm going to start Firefox. Okay. And I'm going to go I'm going to go to some website here. I don't know why this isn't coming up. Ah, there it goes. Okay. Now I have 3 windows, but look, I can't see Word anymore. What do? Well, I go to my taskbar and I find Word and I click on it and there it is. Now my taskbar hides. And your taskbar probably doesn't. I'm going to go to the taskbar. I right-clicked in my taskbar in an empty spot, and I clicked on taskbar settings. And I'm going to say automatically hide the taskbar, and I'm going to turn that off. And now notice my taskbar is up all the time. So watch what happens when I click on Chrome, it becomes top. I click on Word, it becomes top. I click on PowerPoint, it becomes the top, right? So that's the basics of what you do there. And the other thing that you can do is if you hold down the Alt key and click the Tab key, hold down the Alt key on the left with your thumb, don't do this now, and hit Tab, notice a window comes up that lets me choose which thing I want on top. As I tab, it shows me the other things that are running, and I can tab around and find the thing that I want to be on top. That's another way you can do it. And that's an easy way. But the taskbar is actually the easiest way. If you can see a piece of the window, just click on a piece of the window and you're there. Now, I'm going to minimize this stuff, get it out of my way here, and I'm going to show you as the last part of this demonstration how to look at your start menu. I'm looking over here at my taskbar in the lower left-hand corner. I click on Start, and I get this big, pretty menu. And what it shows me is the things that are recently added, and then it starts showing me everything on this computer in alphabetical order. So if I want the calculator, I just click on the calculator, and bingo, there's the calculator, okay? And one of the most important things about the Start button is if you right-click on it, not left-click, but right-click, you get this other menu. And the most important one here is Shut Down or Sign Out. And if you could, and this is what you should do at the end of the day, is shut down your computer. And you do it by right-clicking on the Start button and hitting shut and going to Shut Down or Sign Out. And notice that these are menus. You have to drift your mouse. It's called hovering. You don't click, you just move your mouse and that menu automatically pops out. And you roll over to that and you can see that which one is selected because it's distinguished by a different background. In this case, a lighter shade of gray. Okay. The final thing I'm going to talk about here is I'm over on the right-hand side of my taskbar now, and I click on this little audio speaker guy. And there's my speakers. It says which speakers I'm using and how loud they are. And then I'm going to click on the network thingy. And once again, it says network connected. This computer doesn't even have Wi-Fi. It's kind of old. Now, I'm going to go back and we're going to resume the PowerPoint slideshow. So give me a second here. Oh, I know what I have to do. Hold on. Why is Zoom not showing me? Ah, that's what I need to do. I got it. Okay. Now, I'm going to share the screen again. And I'm going to, actually, before I do that, I'm going to go down and I'm going to turn off I'm going to hide my taskbar again because I don't like it when it's there. There. Now I'm going to screen share. I'm going to go back to the PowerPoint slideshow. All right. Now we're moving on to the next section, which is the basics of using a window. And the subheading here is windows are mostly all the same. If you think about a window as just being a rectangle that's owned by some program, some application, then a lot of the confusion is going to go away. So a window is just an area of the screen for displaying information. Every window is owned by some program that's running right now. If a program isn't running right now, it won't have a window. And that is important to know. Most windows are rectangular. Not all of them, but most of them are. Almost all you'll ever encounter are rectangular at some level. They may be long and skinny. They may be tall and skinny. They may be really fat, but they're rectangular. And you can move, resize, and change the appearance of almost all windows. You can zoom most windows. Large parts of windows are called panes. Little pieces are often referred to as widgets or controls. I'm going to use the word widgets because that's kind of neutral. Now we're going to talk about the basic parts of a window. This is a little program I wrote that doesn't do anything but show the parts of a window. For this purpose, the most important part of the window is up here at the top. It's the title bar. Why is it important? Well, first, because it lets you move the window around. Second, it's where a lot of the stuff like minimizing, maximizing, closing, and other things are located. Just below the menu bar, you very often, below the title bar, you find the menu bar. And that's where you have things like open, close, print, save, things like that. And the big part, the white blob in this window, is whatever the program wants it to be. So the program designers choose what's there. If it's a web browser, it'll be whatever the website's designers have chosen to put in that part of the page. And the way you drag a window, and this is an important notion, is you've got to grab the window by an empty part of the title bar. Whoops. By an empty part of the title bar. We're going to demonstrate this again at the end of this section. And you hold your left mouse button down and you drag. So the term drag in Windows world means position the cursor where you want it, hold down the left mouse button and move your hand up, down, left, right, wherever you want it to go. Now, windows are totally different for different programs, but everything inside of the Windows border is part of that window and it's owned by that application. And we're going to talk about this in a little more detail in a second. Now, in truth, in Windows, you're really only dealing with one program at a time. There may be multiple programs running, but only one of them is really listening to your keyboard and listening to your mouse. And we call that program the program that has focus. I've said most of this stuff already. One of the things I want to emphasize is that inside the focus program, very, very often, most of the time, it will show you which part of its window you are talking to by changing that thing to show that it's selected, that it's the currently active thing that your mouse is on. And usually it's very closely related to your mouse. Okay, we're now coming to one of the most important ideas of all. And that is, and this is something I find a lot of older people don't do very well. As you move around, you must watch what happens to your mouse pointer. Okay, if you can see my mouse pointer, you see it's just a pointer. A pointer doesn't tell you anything. It says your mouse is here. But as you move around, and I'll demonstrate this, your pointer can change a lot. You know that it turns into a hand when you can click on a link. It'll turn into a caret, we call it, where you can insert text. It'll turn into a bunch of different kinds of arrows, double-ended arrows, when you can move a window or resize a window. And then there's a whole bunch of others. But the main thing is that, and we'll demonstrate this in a minute with Gmail, as you move around the window, watch what happens to the cursor. And I'm not talking about clicking, I'm talking about just moving around, hovering the mouse, and watching what happens to the cursor. We call it the cursor. That's the image of the mouse. Here's a mistake I see a lot of people making, and that is when you're interacting with a program, you should be able to see all four edges of the window. People will have a window where the bottom of it's off the screen, or the left-hand part's off the screen, or the top is, they'll say, I can't find X. Well, the reason you can't find X is because you're not seeing the whole potato, okay? And if you can't see all four edges, move or resize the window. The easiest way to avoid this problem is to maximize the window, because then it's limited to the size of your monitor, and it will take up just that amount of real estate. But if you want multiple windows and want them to be tiled, and you want to look at different things, be sure you can see all four edges. That requires that you know how to move a window and you know how to resize a window. And we're going to go into resizing a lot. The basic way you resize is to position your mouse, hover it, over the border of the window and watch what cursor it changes to, and you'll be able to stretch it, widen it, make it taller, or move it around depending on what the cursor does. Again, we mostly know what maximizing and minimizing means. Minimizing means put it in the taskbar. Maximizing means make it as big as possible. And then the X, which is up in the upper right-hand corner, means close this window or this application, depending on whether it's the main window of an application or a sub-window. And we'll talk about some other ways. Okay. The final thing is handling vision problems. There is a global magnification setting for all of Windows, all of your Windows. And this can change from user to user on the same computer. And most of the time, Windows will choose about 125%, 150%. I use a very detailed monitor. I have 150%. But you can change the overall view of windows, or you can change the view of a particular window. And most programs like Chrome and Firefox and Word will remember those changes. I will demonstrate that during the demonstration portion. And again, you can zoom with the control key and the mouse wheel, the way I talked about. If you really have a vision problem, there's a thing called accessibility, which lets you change to very high contrast display where everything is black or white, which people who are vision impaired often need. Okay, we've come to the next demonstration phase. I'm going to stop sharing. I'm going to come over here, and I'm now going to share my desktop with you. Okay, again, I'm going to move windows around to kind of make life easy for me. Now, I'm going to demonstrate opening a simple program. On all Windows machines, there's a program called Notepad. And notice as I typed it, it came up and said Notepad is an app. I click on that, and there is Notepad. Now notice something. I'm not seeing the bottom of this window. It looks like it runs right off the edge of the screen. How do I fix that? I go to the top and notice the cursor change. This is a text editor program. I can type here. Notice the cursor now is that caret. It's that vertical bar that says you can insert text here. But I'm going to slowly move off of that part of it, and I'm going to go up. Notice as soon as I leave it, the cursor turns back to a pointer. And I'm going to position in an empty part of the title bar, and I'm going to drag the window. So I'm moving the window around. Woo, look at that. I can move it off the screen, not a good idea. I can move it off the screen, not a good idea. And now let's talk about resizing. Now notice, I'm going to go to the upper right-hand corner here. Why isn't it there? Hold on a second. I'm going to use the lower right-hand corner. And notice the cursor has now changed to an angled double-headed arrow. I'm going to hold down my left mouse button, and I can now resize the window. Notice I can do the same thing from this corner. I can make it wide. Woo, there it is. I can make it tall. And there it is. And now I'm going to try something else. And by the way, of course, you can maximize the window, or you can normal size. If you're maximum and you click this thing, it normal sizes it. Now I'm going to exit this, and I'm going to go back and run it again, and I'm going to see if it remembers. See, it came up in the same size and in the same location I previously had it. That's very important. Now, I'm going to I already did a demonstration of Z ordering, but I'm going to show you using the taskbar. Now notice I had to move down to my taskbar to get it to show up. But if I want to bring up a window, I bring up a window. Now what if I've got this maximized? This is Word, but I decide that I want to go to my Chrome. Well, I click Chrome, and there's Chrome, okay? What if I want to go back to Word, I just click on Word. If I want to unmaximize, I click the unmaximize button. If I want Chrome on top, I click on Chrome. But now I want to show you, actually I'm going to save that for the next section because I want to do a little more detail on things. Anyway, oh, Pat joined my meeting. Good. Nice email there. I'm going to minimize this again, and we're going to move on. Okay. All right, we're back to the next section. And this may be the single most important section of this entire talk, and that is be a child, explore, discover, figure things out. There isn't a day that goes by that in some application that I've used for 10 years, like Firefox, I don't discover something new. Not every app, not every time, but almost every day, some application that I thought I knew really well, I discover something new and nifty, sometimes not so nifty, that I'm able to do. Modern software is designed to be explored. Now, Windows programs, smartphone applications, and websites are designed to be explored, not taught. This came from the world of video games, because video games were designed for people of all ages and all educational backgrounds, and even designed for children who can't read. Well, how do you teach a non-literate child how to play a game? Well, you make little icons and little pictures, and you click on things and let them drag things around, let them select stuff. And then while they're playing the game, you pop up words or images that give them an idea of what they're supposed to do. Are they supposed to look for the gold? Are they supposed to kill the dragons? And this idea of people learning by doing, learning through their exploration and their curiosity, has become the modern model for everything. So these days, somebody will say, oh, I got a great new app. It's called Instagram. You got to try it. That's usually all a younger person needs. They know to go to the App Store, they download Instagram, they put it on their computer. The Instagram application sets them up an account, and everything else they learn by clicking and tapping on every damn thing they see on the screen. And everything they don't see, they'll hold their fingers down, they'll tap, they'll drag, they'll move, and just see what happens. You got to left click on things, right click on things, watch the cursor change, play around with the menus, find the program settings, and we'll talk about Chrome and its settings in a minute, because I know most of you use Chrome. I'm using it as an example. And the bottom line here is you've got to set aside time for non-goal oriented play. You've got to treat it as a game, and it's a beneficial game because it's like learning to cook. The more you know, the faster you can cook it and the better your results are. I'm going to give you some terminology that's really important here. You know what clicking a mouse button is, and you know that there's a left and right mouse button. Dragging is holding down the left mouse button and keeping it held down while you move the mouse across the pad. Hovering means just moving the mouse and leaving it there to see what happens. Because many, many times modern applications will explain everything you need to know. If you just hover over something, it'll pop up a little box, which many people call a tooltip, which tells you what that thing does. And we'll see that in a minute. Now, this is a very busy program. This is a menu bar. And what I did was I clicked on the word file, and I got a ginormous menu. And then I hovered over the word create, and I got another big menu. But notice every menu that has menus beneath it, what we call submenus, has a little triangle on the right. These little triangles are now ubiquitous icons, meaning that there's more here. Either hover over it or click on it and you'll see more. Hopefully you don't deal with programs as complex as this, but the model of dealing with menus is all the same. And most programs use menus. Now, Chrome does not, and these days Microsoft Office does not. But almost all the older programs look like this at some level. Now, we're going to talk about Microsoft Office for just a minute. What happened years ago, just shortly after I left Microsoft, was they realized that Word and Excel and the other programs in Microsoft Office were just getting way too complicated. They had literally hundreds of menu items, and nobody could ever find anything. So they tried putting in command keys, and that didn't work. So what they decided to do was, rather than have people go through 4 or 5 levels of menus and bring up some strange window they'd never seen, they decided to move the options into a thing called the ribbon. And there's 2 really important notions here on the screen you have to understand that we'll talk about a lot. And the first one is the notion of a tab. Take a look at the top here where there's the word file. Now, normally in a program that would be a menu, but instead, if you look at it, we're actually on the home menu, and you can tell because it's highlighted, but it's supposed to be like tabs in a file folder. So there's a file tab, a home tab, an insert tab, and so on, and we'll see this tab thing a lot when it comes to talking about browsers. That is to say, things like Chrome and Firefox and Edge. But what happens is, in the ribbon, most of the things that most people want to do are not just available. They're right there, and all you have to do is click on them. And I'll show you this later. But the deal is that they're there very graphically represented. So the first one, if you notice under this ribbon, if you look at the home ribbon, that's divided into little sections. And the section names are on the left, are on the bottom. So starting from the left, each one of these guys, there's clipboard. Oops, didn't want to do that. There's clipboard. The next one to the right is font. So everything you want to do with the clipboard, and we'll talk about the clipboard at another time, is here. Mostly it has to do with copying and pasting. Font is here. All the things, changing size, paragraph, all the things, styles. So all this stuff that used to be under 6 levels of menus is now right there in front of your face. And again, this is not something I want to spend a lot of time on because we've got a lot of material, but playing around, open up an empty document, just a blank page, and just type in some stuff and just start changing the font, changing the paragraph, setting the styles, and play around and learn about the ribbon and learn about what Word can do for you. Now, this is an important notion that for some reason most people just don't have. On the left, you'll see of the white part, right after the black part, is a scroll bar. And the scroll bar has parts. At the top, it has a little up arrow thingy. And at the bottom, it's got a corresponding down arrow thingy. If you click on or hold your mouse down over the top arrow part, you'll go up in the flow of the window and see things that are more and more towards the top. The opposite with the lower button, you'll see more and more things down below. People know that. You can also click inside the gutter, inside the body of the window to click upward. If you click below the gray area here is called a thumb. If you click below that, you'll go down in the document. If you click above it, you'll go high. Another thing you can do is drag the thumb. You can put your finger on the thumb. Oops. You can put your finger on the thumb and drag it along, and it will move the window for you, okay? But another thing that most people don't know, and it's really an important idea, most times there's not a scroll bar unless there's too much material to show you. Most programs remove the scroll bars if you're seeing the entire window, and I'll demonstrate that. If you see a scroll bar, that means that all of it is not visible. So you need to look for it. And the final thing is that the thumb, which is this thing in the middle, usually is an indicator of how much you're seeing. In other words, if you were seeing almost all of it, the thumb would fill up almost all the gutter. Right now, this thumb is telling me intuitively, I'm only seeing about 15% of all the data that's really there. Okay, now we come to one of the most important demonstrations. And again, I'm going to stop the sharing. And I'm going to go back over here and move this one more slide and close that. And then I'm going to go back to sharing my desktop. And I'm going to open this Word document, and you recognize it because, at least Jim does, it's the syllabus for my program. So notice that as I move around, the cursor becomes all kinds of different stuff. Let's start at the top. Here I have a save option, and here I have some stuff that lets me customize it. Here I have the name of the document. This is my identity in Windows, and a lot of other stuff. But if I want to move the window, I have to pick an empty area. If I pick something else might happen. Now watch when I go down. As I move around, it's highlighted. So I can click on Insert, and I get a different ribbon. Click on Home, I get a different ribbon. Design, that's a complicated one. Go to Home, different window. And notice that as I walk along, all I did was hover, and look what happened. A little window appeared that said Increase Indent. Move your paragraph further away. Hold on a second. Notice that as I move over the font thing, it says change case, meaning make it upper or lower. If I go to the U, it'll say underline. So a really important thing is just to hover and see what the system says. Now, this is just a document that I wrote, and it's using the template that I normally have. Now notice, when I click on the word overview, I get a flashing cursor. That means if I type a character, it's going to go there. If I want to undo that, there's a key command I can do that. If I double click on it, it selects it. If I now type again, It removes everything I did, and I'm typing on top of it. I can also drag and select the text, and then I can, and notice it comes up with this menu for all the things I can do. I can also move this guy. I can literally drag the text and change the document just by dragging and dropping stuff. Now notice the scroll bar over here. I'm at the top of the document. If I click down here, it's going to page along and show me what's lower in the document. If I click above the scroll bar, it's going to move up. If I drag the scroll bar, I get things up and down. Now, I'm trying to see something here. So Windows, Word does not have a horizontal scroll bar, but we'll do that in a minute. Also notice down here at the bottom, there's this slider, and I hover over it, it says zoom. I can click on that and I can change to where I can be legally blind and still read this stuff, okay? And I use generally about 100%. Again, the Office ribbon is activated by clicking on the right tab and finding the thing you want to do. For most people, most of the time, the stuff you really need is right here in the Home tab. That's why they put them in the Home tab. Now, I'm going to I'm going to go to a browser now, and I'm going to show you something about Chrome. Now, you know how this works. You've seen this. This is not my Gmail for TLC. This is my regular Gmail. Now, notice if I come over here to these three bars, I didn't used to know at all what they meant, but I hovered over them. It turned into a hand, meaning you can click here, and it popped up and said main menu. Watch. If I click on that, the menu goes away. Okay, and now it comes back. Menu goes away, it comes back. The point is, I didn't know that until a couple of weeks ago. I never bothered, but what I wanted to do was see more of my email. And the result was, I clicked on this, and it did the right thing. And it's well designed because all I have to do is click again, and it undoes whatever I did. Now, I'm going to hover over here, and it says select, and it's got a little pointy arrow. So I click on that, and it says I can look at all or none or read this way. Here's three things. What do they do? It says more. That's not very informative. Mark all as read. Now I can come up here on the question mark. It says support. On the settings, on the gear, it says settings. I click on that, and I get the settings. I get the so-called quick settings. It's taken some of my window space for the main settings that Chrome has. And there's a little Xe here to close this pane, this sub window, right? And then I've got the infamous 9 dots, and it says Google Apps. So this is all designed such that you don't need to know anything. You can come in here and you can click on stuff, and you can do whatever you want to do. So we're going to deal with the next section here in a minute. I wanted to show you Firefox for a second, just to show the differences. Now notice Firefox has a traditional menu. Okay, I'm going to wait for it to load the page. This system's slower than my regular system. There it is. This is a Seattle Post-Intelligencer. So notice up here, I have menu items. I click on File, and it gets, I've got New Tab, New Window, Open File, Save Page. I've got Edit, yada, yada, yada. Now, notice that I have a scroll bar again, and it tells me that I've got a whole lot of page that I have not looked at. And I can do things like when I hover over a bookmark, it tells me exactly what the bookmark is. When I hover over this guy, it says view your history, save bookmarks, and more. When I hover over this, it says open menu. Now look at that. And now I can come down here and I can find, they call it options in Firefox. And here's all my options. These are all the things I can do. So what did I do? I just loaded it up and I began to poke around. I began to look at stuff. What is it? Show sidebars. Well, there's my bookmarks toolbar. How do I get rid of it? Click it again. Show sidebars. Okay. But again, the model here is you're just poking around with no goal in mind to learn how to use the tools you've got better. I'm sorry, I know we're covering an enormous amount of information very, very quickly, but I want to get this down, and I'm hoping that everyone is tolerating this. And again, when you watch this video, the goal is you take it a chunk at a time, the same way that you would eat tostadas. You take a chip at a time, you take that information, you try it, you like it, you get confused, you go back, and that's why we're going to have the Q&As. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and bring up PowerPoint again and restart my slideshow. I didn't want to do that. I'm going to share my screen. And here we are back again. Now this is going to be this is the last section, and it's vitally important because not only does the notion of files and folders show up all over Windows, it's the main logical organization for every computer system on the planet, but it's also going to show up every time we deal with clouds or thumb drives or any other kind of device for storing data. Files and folders is going to be the metaphor that you need to understand how things are working. So, and most of you have heard this from me at one time or another. A file is a chunk of storage space with a name. And you can have some relatively big names, and we'll talk about that. But mostly you should name it something that makes sense to you, like, TLC meeting, September 15th, whatever. A folder, and it's also called a directory. I prefer folder. A folder is a name group. It's just like a folder in a filing cabinet. It has a little tabby on it that's got a name that can be very long and descriptive. And in that folder, there can be files, like there is in a filing cabinet. But the difference between a computer folder and a filing cabinet is in a computer folder, you can have folders inside folders, and those folders can have files and folders in them, and those folders can have files and folders in them. This is what's known in logic as a recursive definition. A folder is defined by the fact that it can contain folders. It's self-referential. Take-home message number one. One of the job one, or maybe two, of a modern computer is every drive or storage, whether it's a hard drive, a modern solid-state drive, a thumb drive, or anything else. Windows' job is to give that top-level folder a name, that drive folder, and then present everything else on there as a collection of files and folders. So every time a drive appears in Windows, for example, when you plug in a thumb drive, Windows will give it a name. You can choose the name, but Windows will often give it a name like F:, and that there's historical reasons going back to the 80s why it's F:, and not just F or whatever. But the top level of that thumb drive is a folder, and it's called F:, and that is the top level folder. And within that, there can be files and folders, and within them can be files and folders, and it forms what's called a tree. And this is a primary function of all operating systems, and these actually exist completely the same on the Apple iPhone. However, they hide it, so they make it very confusing. If you use Android, you can see it. It's totally the same thing. Now, here's an example of a file hierarchy. At the top is a folder. And in this case, they used a good example, which is your documents folder. Underneath that, you can have other folders, and you can have a file. And underneath the tours folder, she has 3 other folders. And underneath those, they have files. I mean, at some point you run out of folders, but the idea is you make up this organization. Windows doesn't create this for you. Windows says, here be your documents folder, go with God. It's up to you to figure out what you're going to do with the documents folder. Some of your applications will create little folders where they store their data, but typically you want to organize your documents folder based on the categories of work that you do. Now, I have a document that I wrote for Bonnie long ago about creating files and folders and naming files and folders, so I don't want to go into that. The point is these things are important, And most people I see just higgledy-piggledy drop stuff into a folder and hope that they can find it a month from now. Good luck. Don't do that. You have to go meta, I call it. You have to step back from your problem and say, what's really happening here? Oh, this is about this new group that I want to form. So I'm going to name that folder by that group name. And then inside that, I'm going to have my supporting materials, my mailing list, my web links, whatever it is. So that's going to be on you. Every individual is challenged with the fact that there ain't no angel on his shoulder saying, here's how to organize your file hierarchy. This is the window that on my computer shows up when I open the Windows Explorer. Now it looks kind of busy because I've got a lot of network locations. Most of you have no network locations. I run a small subnetwork here, and Bonnie and I do fancy things with another computer where it stores all of our myriad amounts of data. Don't worry about that. But notice at the top where it says devices and drives, I have a C drive, a D drive, and data. Now these are the names. Windows is the name of the drive, but inside Windows it's called C:. I have another one called media where I put all my videos and audio, and that's called D:, and I have another one for backup data which is just called data, which is E. So if I were on my computer, and I'll demonstrate this in a minute, I can click in there, but what this is telling you, that's the name of the top level folder. And over on the left, you see a bunch of quick access things. Windows will put over there the places you've recently been, and you can just click on them to go there again. Or you can put things in the quick access folder. Notice I have personal stuff. I have TLC villages as a quick access, so I can get there. I'm going to demonstrate how to do that. Down below, you have all the other things that you can see. If you scroll the scroll bar down, you'll see lots and lots of stuff. Now, once again, the magic of right-clicking. In this window, I'm sitting here, and you can see what folder I'm in. I'm in Computer, Documents, TLC DB. That's what our database is called. That's the name of a program I wrote to manage our database. I clicked on settings.xml, and it got selected. The way I can tell it's selected is because it's highlighted in a way that nothing else in the folder is highlighted. It's got a blue rectangle around it. Then when I right-clicked, I got this menu. And the menu, it says I can open it, I can edit it, I can do properties on it. That's a very important thing. You can cut it, you can copy it. So many, many important things happen when you right-click on a window. Now, file and folder names are basically flexible. I can name things in Arabic on my computer if I want to. I don't because I don't read Arabic that well, so it's kind of stupid. But I use Latin and Spanish names, French names with special characters all the time. It's very wide open. The first thing to know is Windows doesn't care about upper and lowercase, not one iota. As I say in here, lowercase document is the same as the word document with any combination of upper and lowercase letters. So when a program expects to find it, it's going to ignore upper lowercase. Upper lowercase is kind of a Western European convention. Many, many languages don't have upper and lowercase. Most file names simply are whatever text you want to use, followed by a period or a dot and some kind of extension, like Word documents end in .docx. Now, this is an option to show these. Your screen may or may not show the .docx. Or the .xlsx for Excel or something like that. If you see it, all it means is that's a way that Windows uses to identify what application knows how to manipulate that file. So when you double click on a file like my daily journal.docx, Windows says, wait a minute, what's the extension? Oh, it's docx. Oh, that's Microsoft Word. It starts Microsoft Word and gives it your document. Now, folders can be named any way you like as well. And they don't typically have extensions, but you can do that if you want. Like sometimes when I'm reworking things, I'll rename a folder to .old. I'll call it like, let's say it's meetings. And I want to reorganize the meetings folder. I'll make a copy of it and I'll rename the old one to .old and I'll reorganize it. And if I think I did a good job, I'll delete the old one. And here's the take-home message of this slide. Files are usually created by programs. And you have the option to put files wherever you want to, but they're not going to get organized unless you think about your folder structure and put files in the right places. And the folders don't care what's in them. Boy, you should see my website folder. I've got graphic images, I've got movies, I got HTML code, I've got configuration files. I mean, I just got, when you build a website, it's like, it's kitchen sink. It's every kind of file you can imagine. And that's very important. Finally, the desktop is a folder. There's actually a place on your computer called the desktop that is a folder. I can show you where it is, where every icon and every document and everything else in your desktop, on your desktop, is stuck there, except for the taskbar. Okay? Now, I'll show you how to create new Explorer windows. Remember, the desktop is run by the Explorer. I'll show you how you can drag and drop files. I'll show you about cut, copy, and paste. But that's better demonstrated than it is to talk about. I want to distinguish between cut, copy, and paste. The big analogy is copy and paste. That's where you make a copy of something and put it somewhere else. Cutting means this thing I just cut, hang on, I'm going to put it somewhere else. If you succeed in pasting it, it is removed from where it was and put to where you pasted it. If you fail, it'll remain where it was, no harm, no foul. Now, this is not true if you're moving it to a different drive. It will simply make a copy. But remember, Windows gives you the power to shoot yourself in the foot. You can even shoot yourself in the head. So you should really only play around with things in your Documents folder. And typically, I create new folders when I'm saving a file. I develop a file, and either I have a folder where I want to put it already, and I know that, or I want to create a new folder, and you can do that all at the same time. The final topic here is about application and file icons. Now, you know what a file icon is. That's that stuff that's all over your desktop. Everybody tries to come up with a nice icon that makes his application distinct, but an icon is usually identified with either a file or an application. And I'll show you in a minute that Microsoft Word's application has one icon. A Microsoft Word document has another. Okay, so the application and file are not the same thing, but programs have icons because a program is a file. Somewhere on your hard drive, there's a program called Chrome. Somewhere on your hard drive, there's a program called Edge. Now, I don't want to get into the details of that, but the idea is when your computer is off, where do the programs go to die? They go onto the hard drive. Where do they come back to life when you click on them? They come off the hard drive. So programs are also files. One of the important things to know about the desktop is the idea of a shortcut. A shortcut is not the document itself or the program itself. It is a pointer or a reference to that. Now, if you take a look at my little image after this fourth bullet, it shows an icon with an A on it. That's a Microsoft Access document icon. And under it, it says TLC database. But the big thing here is notice this little bent arrow that's in a little white background rectangle. That means this is not the document. This is a shortcut or a pointer to the document. And when you double click on either an icon or a shortcut icon, it runs it. And we'll go into these things in the demonstration. Here, for example, is a piece of a catalog, a folder on my hard drive. And there's two things to note. One is that at the left of every single file is a little picture that if you look at it long enough, you'll notice. You can tell right away, this is Excel, this is Visio, this is a PDF, that's Excel, Word, PDF, and down here, PowerPoint. And if you're confused about that, you can come over to type and it'll tell you, the type column will tell you exactly what it is. And these are documents, and that means that if I double click on one of those, it's going to open the application listed under type and tell the application to open the document you just gave it. And then over on the far right, you can see how big it is. Okay, the time has come for me to do this again. And I'm going to share the screen and go through probably the single most important set of demonstrations. Well, they're all important. Wouldn't put anything in here if it weren't important. Okay. I want you to look closely here at PowerPoint, Publisher, Word. These are Microsoft Office thingies. Notice every one of them has the little white shortcut guy. And that's important. Now notice up here, I'm dragging this down. This is a Word doc that doesn't have a shortcut. It's actually on my desktop. It's actually in my desktop folder. Same thing with this PowerPoint guide. It is actually in my desktop folder. Most things on a desktop should have the shortcut sub-icon or part of an icon. Now, I want to show you that if I click over here on this PC, I get a window that's got various, and I can collapse this silly folders thing. But first, before I do that, I'm going to go into my documents. Okay, this is my documents folder. And they're all folders. There's actually one thing that's not a folder. And the icon on this says Windows doesn't know what the hell it is. The little white piece of paper icon is a default icon that means we don't know what that is. Now, this is an Explorer window. And the most important thing I can tell you is that you can come over to File and you can open a new Explorer window. Bingo, now I have two of them. Now, let's take an example. I'm going to go into a program. I'm trying to find, let's go to backup. Now, I'm going to open the folder over here by double clicking on it. And I'm going to click on this guy. Don't worry about what it is or why it is. And I'm going to drag it and I'm going to drop it over here. Okay. Now, what's confusing, oops, it went into a folder. There it is. I meant to drop it into the catalog. Now, I'm going to drag it back. And notice, as I'm dragging, you're seeing the icon above my cursor. That means it's really dragging, right? If I were to drag from here over to here, there's no icon being dragged. It's not happening. So another way to do this, and this is what I recommend, TLCers, is don't use drag and drop. You right-click on something and you say copy, and then go to the other window and say paste. Boom. If you say cut, it goes away. Now, if I right-click on this guy, I can now say delete. And it'll ask me, are you sure about that? And I say, yes, I am. And notice up here at the top, there's two ways that I can navigate easily. One way is just to go up here and click in this address bar and go to documents. I can go back to this PC. I can go to my documents again. I can pick a folder. But then let's say, for sake of argument, that I really wanted to go to the Adobe folder all the time. It was really important. I can drag it over to my quick access bar and drop it there. And now every time I want to go there, all I've got to do is click on it. It's empty, so that's not a big deal. Now, notice that, just to give you an example, I have many, many files and folders, and this is nothing like my real machine. Under projects, I have hundreds of projects, and they have lots of stuff inside. But what the file and folder concept does is it lets you simplify by organizing things into recognizable clumps at the top level. Now, I want to talk about icons a minute. And once again, you can see that this is if I do this, it comes up and says, I hover, it says Microsoft Word document, author David Hovel. I double click on it, and Windows, the Explorer actually, finds out that a docx is opened by Microsoft Word, loads Microsoft Word, tells Microsoft Word what document, and Bob's your uncle, it's there. These are basic mechanisms that happen with everything. But the main thing, oops, I didn't want to close it. You need to do is play around. Now, you might not have a this PC folder. It might be your name, Jim. In your case, it's the folder owner. You might have one that has your name, or it might say computer. But nonetheless, if you look at these devices and drives, this is drive C. If I double click on it, I'm seeing all of drive C. Now, you probably don't want to do that. You probably want to come over and click on documents. But notice where I am on the left, there's a thing called desktop. If I click on that, this is actually all the files that are on my desktop. Most of them are shortcuts, some of them are not. So the name shortcut doesn't mean it's not a shortcut. Over here at the type, it says shortcut. And I can click around and look at things, but the main thing I want to point out is that you need to be able to open and explore a window, and usually to move things from one place or another, you either have to be able to manipulate things, like what I did a minute ago, where I went in here and I can right click on this guy and say copy, and I can go someplace else and say paste, and I'm doing this all with right clicks. Okay. The fact is that you need to be able to open at least one Explorer window. I recommend two. I recommend that when you get to where you want to go, you come up here with File, you open a new window, and you go to where you want the file to go. In other words, if you've got something that's in the wrong place, open two windows and cut from one window or copy from one window and paste into the other. Now, it's important too to look at all of the stuff that you can do when you right click. You can open it, which means you can look at it. You can open with it. Don't worry about that. But like, for example, if it's a web page, I got 4 different browsers that can look at it. You can cut it, copy it. You can make a shortcut. You can delete it. You can rename it, or you can look at its properties. And this is a big, complicated window that says who created it, when it was created, how big it is, yada, yada, yada. The main thing is learn to right-click on stuff, because right-clicking is very important. For example, if I'm in this white area and I want to make a folder, I can right-click in the white area and I can say New Folder. And then I can say this is a new folder. Boom. And there's my new folder. And now I can take these two guys, and actually I'll have to show you that trick, and I'm going to cut them, and I'm going to go into my new folder and I'm going to paste them. Boom. Okay. Remember, for you children at home, when you're doing this on your own computer, create a dummy folder. Call it dummy. Call it practice. I prefer to call it dummy because dummy is pretty explanatory. Copy and paste some files in there, and then practice moving files, creating folders, deleting folders, dragging stuff around. Not a problem. In other words, make it a no-fault exercise. Lower your fear threshold by playing with stuff that is completely irrelevant that you can delete later. All of you have more than enough room on your computers to do this without fear of running out of room. Today's computers have more room than almost anybody except people like me could care about. And I think I've come mostly to the end of this section. I'm going to stop sharing. I'm going to go back one more time. Whoops. A little too fast there on the draw. I'm going to go to here. I'm going to share once again. Okay. This slide serves two purposes. One is to show that most quotes in presentations have no purpose. I find them egregious, almost insulting, banal, and academic. This quote is not really a pointless quote. For those of you who are Monty Python fans, you know never to expect the Spanish Inquisition. For those of you who are not, the real purpose of this slide is to see whether people have actually watched the video. If somebody calls me or I get an email from somebody and says, oh, I don't really know about copying files, I say, okay, what was pointless quote number 1? And if they can't tell me, I know they didn't watch the video, yeah. Okay, I don't mean it that nastily, but I wanted something that would be a bookmark, a hallmark of whether people had actually done their homework, because the new mantra, another way to look at the new model of support in TLC is, above all, help yourself. Watch the videos, practice, read other websites, watch other videos if you can. And then if you're still stuck, fine, we'll help you, because we have this wonderful Zoom screen sharing remote control thingy going on. But there is no help like help for yourself, and you will not understand until you play. It's just like the guitar. One of my favorite examples, this is my pointless quote, one of my quotes of my life, is I could sit with you 6 hours a day and talk guitar. I could tell you everything I know with words and gestures and emphasis about how to play, how to tune it, how to read music, how to organize chords, how to put your fingers. And I could do that for 2 years. And at the end of those 2 years, you wouldn't be able to play a single damn note, because learning is doing, and doing is making mistakes. And that is the end of my talk. Thank you very much. I'm going to stay online here for some talky talk, comments, objections, whatever. But I'm ending the presentation for TLC video right now. Thank you very much.